Okay, folks, this is Clay with the Clayway here in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and we got a really big problem. We've got a Ford Escape that the floorboard is totally rotted out on. That wasn't bad enough. This is the seat support on the driver's side. So, this is a big deal. But the real question is, can we fix it and can we make it safe? I always say you can't break what's already broken, and if anyone else can do it, you can freaking do it too. We have a lot of the framework where like 3 or 4 pieces of the metal come together. We have something to affix a new floor down to. This is where the floorboard used to tie together and right near the gas pedal, so we're definitely gonna have to do something with this. Since that's the highest point of where the floor is rusted at, we need to connect that together. We've got a big old mess. However, they don't call me the Elon Musk of rust for nothing, so let's see what happens. I'm really unsure how this is going to turn out. Let me show you around this scenario here. Any metal can be fixed and replaced, but unfortunately, my biggest problem with this scenario and doing this job is safety. So here's what the owner did. He went out to the junkyard and he cut a support out. Now, if we look up underneath the seat, that support is right up underneath here under the carpet. Now, this is important because this is what holds the seat from flopping back when you have an accident. We definitely need to rectify that. The problem is he should have cut up along the sides here. This missing is going to be a real problem right here. Normally, we would drill out these spot welds, but I think we're going to have to actually remake this front support for the driver's seat because that's missing right there. Ultimately, at the end, I ended up cutting out all of the extra material and flash along the bottom of here. I ended up grinding it down. I didn't separate the two halves. I just ended up reusing this part because the part that was missing from here was on the other vehicle. And we're gonna end up grafting that into our floor that we make. Obviously, I've got a bit of cutting to do. Some of it just falls out. It's really ridiculous. I mean, this is just complete garbage. All of that's garbage. There's so much garbage in here. Biggest problem is most people would just go, like, let's just replace it. We'll go get a new car. Not everybody can do that. So we need to repair it versus replacing it. And that's what we do on my channel because I believe if anyone else can do it, you can do it too. It's terrible. Now there's a couple schools of thought behind making a floor pan. I didn't see where they sold one, but if they did, it would probably look similar to this Ford F-150 pan that I found on Amazon. I can't do these grooves, which add structural integrity to the pan, but I can make a flat piece of steel, so we're gonna do that. I prefer to repair versus replace. I don't really like buying stuff because, well, we're all on a budget. And I'm here to tell you, friends, any money you save is like paying yourself. So when you don't spend it, you earn it. Now, if you have a problem similar to mine, make sure you go up underneath and look at your subframe connection there to make sure it's not all rusty. See what I'm talking about right here? If he would have left that in there, we would have had good metal here, but we could cut it right here, hold that into the top of there. So that won't work so bad. We'll just cut it on this angle right here. Make sure it overlaps the top of that original one. Should work out just fine, so hopefully I don't have to remake this bad lad. Now, adding that piece inside there, it isn't really going to matter if the seat's up 1/8 of an inch further or higher than it was. What we want is structural integrity, and we want that piece to be connected to each end very secure, so it holds that seat into place if there's a lot of force or a lot of inertia behind it, because your body will compound that force and that inertia by like probably 5 or 10 times. So that thing needs to hold up to about 2,000 pounds of pressure. I hope we can get that solid. You're going to use a whole host of tools to get it down to this part, mostly 7, 8, 10 millimeters. To get most of this out, Phillips screwdrivers, and it's going to be a terrible pain in the butt. I didn't take most of this apart, so that's why I don't have any video. You can do this in your driveway. You just need a little small wire welder. You're not going to have a lift to get up underneath there super well, but neither do I. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're like, I don't use a welder, Clay. I don't really know how. With something like this, you can go to Harbor Freight, or you can look on Facebook Marketplace, get a really cheap, very seldom used little wire welder that can get this job done for you, no problem. In other of my videos, I show you how to amateurly use a wire welder. And I just said amateurly. I don't even know if that's a freaking word. But you're gonna want some other stuff. You're definitely gonna wanna use a wire wheel to clean off as much rust as possible. You're gonna wanna really technically use a truck bed coating, not an undercoating, truck bed coating. But I have this rust converter here, and I've been wanting to try it out for a while, so I'm going to use a little bit of that. Use cutoff wheel, Sawzall, and if all of that fails, just use a lighter and set that sucker on fire. You should always carry a lighter because you never know when you're going to need to set something on fire, and you need that sucker. Hammer and some kind of flat tool to break up some of this. When I say flat tool, I mean like a screwdriver, a steel putty knife, things of that nature. You're going to need to break up a bunch of that sound dampening material. I know that it just looks like rubber stuff, but you can use that glue to remake these strips. These strips sound dampen things. They're not really there for to hold things together because obviously they don't do that. We're not going to stop any of this rust. It's going to keep going. So we're just going to put a little bit more life in this vehicle.
Otherwise known as lipstick on a pig.
Whoa! I can almost just sit here and do this sometimes with a lot of this metal. Eventually it'll break off. It heats up as you're twisting it back and forth. Or you could just cut it off. While you're cutting this out, be mindful of objects underneath there. You know, brake lines, gas lines, and stuff like that. And that's the point of why I'm going to use the cutoff wheel, because it won't penetrate real deep.
Yes, I have been told, neither do I.
I want to get back to this solid metal that's back here. I mean, obviously this is solid because it still has paint on it. This is probably not so solid, but this beam runs down here. So that's going to be our floor support. Now this floor is supposed to have waves and contours in it. Obviously we're going to use a flat piece of steel, so it's not going to be super wavy and super contoured. We're going to make this completely out of fiberglass. You could lay down some screen sheet, you know, like some stainless steel screen, and fiberglass this whole thing. But that fiberglass is going to get all over your brake lines and fuel lines and stuff like that. And we don't want that. Fiberglass is easy to use. I can't tell you if it was going to be simpler to do it with fiberglass or steel, but I felt like it's simpler to do it with steel. Plus, my welding skills have increased quite a bit over the past 2 years I've been doing it. Feel pretty confident that I can weld most of this in without using fiberglass. Keep it as an option for the sides and the curls and to make some of that like drooping contours. So just be mindful of what you're cutting through. Now you'll notice that I still have this on here and I still have this on here. I think I'm actually going to grind this down and use this pedestal to place my original one that I took out of the other car on here. This, knock it down flush and just set it on top of there. I don't think this has to be super scientific to where it's exactly the same position because it's going to bolt into the back, and the bowl holes have about 1/8 of an inch of movement, so we should be okay. More being mindful. Okay, let's say this came out to here and wasn't rusted as bad. You want to make sure that you cut this panel right on the other side of this, because you don't want to be cutting through this, and this is your leverage and your support to your floor, so you want to be able to connect all of this together. During this process, you're going to be asking yourself, hey, how the hell am I going to know when I'm cutting through good steel and bad steel? Well, it's going to cut totally different. Good steel is going to cut much harder than bad steel. Bad steel, it's going to fly right through. And I recommend getting inside here and walking around a little bit. You'll find holes. Like this hole was not here before I started walking around in here. I thought I only needed to replace from this portion forward. After walking around in here, taking out the center console and stuff like that, I realized, yeah, this is crap and this needs to come out. Now, think rectangles, okay? you want to make this as square as possible. You don't want to be making a bunch of different weirdo shapes and stuff like that. So when you're cutting, cut in straight lines. So you just lay down whatever needs to be laid down. Try to get as much of the rust off as possible. You know, little spots that you can't get to, just sit there and work it. And eventually that stuff will break off because it's going to crumple. This is like terrible throughout here. And I'll end up cutting all of this back or just sitting here working it. Where all of these spots come together, you're generally not going to find a lot of rust. Because when these are formed at the factory, they are clamped together very, very hard, which eliminates most rust from seeping in between there because they're almost airtight. They're clamped so hard. The places where metal comes together are called pinch welds or spot welds. Kept together super, super tight from the factory. So it's often really good metal underneath pinch welds. Can't believe I just farted on camera. I've never done that before, so this is a first. I mean, you're always going to find surface rust, but you're not going to find, you know, pieces of this missing because most of the time clamped so hard. It's crazy. And like here on the sides that this was literally glued down. So we're going to take this glue off of here. And that's why I think that we're going to get away with just gluing this panel down. Structurally, this is where your support comes from. And when you're putting all this back together, I want you to think about it like this. With all this rust here, you've got like a broken circle or kind of like a C. But when you make it a whole complete circle and you tie it all back in as one, it'll be a lot more rigid and be back to, you know, somewhat factory-ish, at least crash part. Can't guarantee it. You know, this is experiments of keeping stuff on the road. If you want your floor to lay as flat as possible, you're going to want to grind all this stuff down. Once we get all of this ground down, you're going to want all of these little tabs off of here where the extra metal was at and where it was on here. That'll make it a nice, smooth, flat surface for everything to lay down as well as it's gonna. Doesn't have to be done in a day, although I'm only about, really technically, like 30 to 45 minutes into removing this floor, and I've already got a pretty good shape and a pretty good idea of what I'm gonna do. In addition to putting down this steel on the floor, I noticed that right here, it's not gonna be very structural. And if you look at where your gavel is, more than likely the foot is going to be rested at this angle and in this area right here. So I'm thinking about making a little bit stronger brace that goes from there and tucks up underneath here. So that has some good structure right there because the metal that we're going to use is going to be a 16 to 18 gauge metal because it's malleable and it's about what they used from the manufacturer. I would assume Ford used like a 20 to 22 gauge metal. And if you've ever noticed anything about Ford metal, it's real shit. They foundry their own metal at Ford. And I don't care what they've been using for a century now, that crap is garbage. All their springs break, shit rust out on theirs that don't rust out on other vehicles. And yeah, it's just complete garbage. You need to get your damn act together over there at that foundry. I thought it was cool that you made your own stuff, but it also was very enlightening why I had to replace a bunch of metal parts that you frickin' make there. Because your metal chemistry is terrible. So this is separate metal from this right here. So I'm just trying to get up underneath there, pop any of this stuff off that's loose. And you usually pop right off if it's real loose. We'll get rid of all of that, or at least as much of it as we can. Okay, so at the shop, when I leave at nighttime, I'll give Christian instructions because he'll come in early in the morning and do all this work. But these instructions are also good for you, so you know what to do. So I just used them for this video. Christian, I want you to grind all of these edges down, make all of this shiny. This right here, I want you to wire wheel, grind, wire wheel, and cut out that shitty stuff. Wire wheel all of this stuff right here so we can paint it eventually. Do not paint anything before I come back. What we need to do is get this top layer off of here down to this flush metal like this is right here, this rivet needs to come off of there, or spot weld. Same thing right here. This feels good. All of this needs to come off of here. This material, I can't find the breathing mask, and it's late, and I've already got it cut out the way that I want it. So I'm gonna leave it up to you. Okay, so while we were grinding this down, we were wearing appropriate safety attire, lenses and everything else. We had the fan on because we're in a small space. But as you can see, we got this ground down pretty good. We caught a little bit of the shoddy, which is what that carpet fiber stuff is that goes underneath your carpet. That's called shoddy. It's made of little children and dildos. No, just kidding. Old jeans, t-shirts and stuff that's ground up. That's why it looks all weird and funky. Now we're gonna coat this with the rust inhibitor. I don't think we're gonna weld a lot of this. I think we're gonna actually glue this down. I mean, hell, Ford glued it together, so why can't we? Might use some rivets or something like that. For the most part, the ingenious Ginger did an excellent job on cleaning this up. Thanks, ingenious Ginger. Now it's pretty important that you cover all of this and everything that was exposed and anything. Now in this situation, this is a weld through primer, but more than likely we're not gonna do too much welding except for that support that I talked about possibly for the floor over there. I think it's a good idea that we weld in a support right there, but other than that, I think this floor is gonna be glued down because our support structure is right here. Okay, so we want to get our basic layout of our floor. I didn't have a piece of construction paper this large, so I just took these floor mats, laid them down. This will give me an idea of what kind of outline I need for my steel. Any spots that we have that are open, we can fiberglass over. So this doesn't have to be exact. There isn't really any wrong way to do this. You just got to keep telling yourself that, hey, this thing was scrap before. Maybe it's not scrap when it's done, but the worst case scenario that it's still gonna be scrap when you're done, I don't think that's gonna be the case. And you can always use the lighter and set this thing on fire. That'll work too. Now we'll tape all of this together and then we'll also measure it out so we have an idea of how to cut out our steel. Remember, we can cut away steel. We can't add steel as easy to the piece that we're going to cut out. So more than likely, it's going to be somewhat of a rectangular design, similar to what I have here, and I'll just fill in the rest with fiberglass. Okay, so I want to get a little floor support from here because this is where our floor used to be. I believe them edges should be supported. Because I'm not going to be able to like weld them very well, I need like an angle on the edge. I decided it would be easier to make little angles versus trying to make angles on the flat steel. So what I'm going to do is I've taken some of this 1/8 inch, which is 11 gauge, and I'm going to bend it over, and then I'll use a ruler to go from here to here to hold this flat. And then I'll tack it down. Now you can glue it down, you can screw it down with some of these, well, these are screws, but self-drillers, self-tappers, whatever you want to call them. You can do any of that stuff. That'll hold it down secure enough. We'll bend these over in the vise. Pretty much do anything you want because it doesn't really matter. We're making this up as we go along. I want to make sure that it's as level as possible. So I'm going to level out the vehicle to make sure that that's level. Doesn't really matter if this is level or not, this actual part right here, because we want to make the parts level. If you go off of this and level this out, then that's going to be level over there. It kind of makes sense in my head anyways. I don't know how to explain it. Because I can move this one, I just made this level so to that, so I'll make that level to this. And that's what we're looking for right there. And you need to do the same thing to these little L's that you made. Once I put this floor down, up underneath the brace that runs through here for the seat, I might want to have something sturdy to build off of. So what I've done is I've taken and I've made a bar and I leveled it out and I pushed it up against here and I'll tack weld it into these spots. Then I made a line in here so I could double them bars up Kind of just like over here, I've got doubled up bars, and then that gives me a nice support in case I need to block up underneath there, or if I want to put some blocks after I put my floor down, I'll have this right up underneath here, and I'll be able to structurally make this more secure, holding it together. The biggest thing that we're concerned about is of impact and the amount of pressure that your body is going to push back on there. And we want it to be as safe as possible, using our head and thinking ahead a little bit. I think these things are necessary. Maybe they won't be, but we'll have them there just in case they need to be. Now, when you do this leveling on the floor, you want to make sure you have both pieces, even though your intention is to weld the bottom portion level, because it will be sitting up too high. So it would be sitting up like this if you don't have two pieces there. One like this, then one like that. So I've taken in and laid in some cross braces. Not that it needed them, because obviously it didn't need them from the factory. But then from the factory, this also rotted all out inside here. So adding this little bit of extra doesn't really hurt anything and can only help. So now the ingenious Ginger has cut out a 34¼ by 21½ flooring we're going to put down inside here. We'll lay that underneath all of the wiring and notch it the way we need, because I think we're going to end up notching it down there to where the comes out right there, but I need to see where it's at. I'm going to have to grind this down, and I'm going to have to paint this just so my floor fits flush. I grind all that down and paint everything. I'm going to lay in my floor, that back out, notch it the way we want it, glue it down. So instead of messing with that floor, because it's kind of encompassing to put that in here and take that out, we'll set this to where it needs to be. Then I'll notch this and then lay this on top of my steel. Remember, this doesn't have to be perfect. You know, we're making this up as we go along, and it'll all turn out just fine. So with that little stud stuck through there, we can take our finger and mark this right here, and then mark it with the marker. We'll be able to lay this right on top of our steel. There we go. When you have spots like this, just fill this in with our epoxy. Epoxy holds up pretty darn well to the elements. Oh, if you can tell, this is what I would have cut off, and I would have been cutting 2 or 3 times. Now I laid this down on here. Now I got this mark, and I can cut this out right here, and the rest of it should be pretty much flat, and what isn't, we can use a hammer. The thing that's really important before you lay this in there permanently is make sure that you coat it primer, because eventually when we're all done, we're going to end up coating the whole thing with like truck bed liner underneath and probably on top. But we may have a little bit of welding to do or some gluing to do. Anything that you're gluing to needs to be roughed up. So we're going to rough it up, and then we'll primer it, and then we'll lay it down. Situation, because it's 14 gauge, I'm using the cutoff wheel. But what I'm doing is I'm just scoring it. I'm not trying to cut it, and the reason I'm not trying to cut it is it's going to break up your wheel. Now that I think that it's going to fit pretty well, I'm going to sand down both sides so it has rough texture to the steel, and then we're going to primer it. We'll install it in the correct position, and then we'll remove it and lay down our cock. Okay, so now we got this puppy all ground up the way we want it. See how that fits. This is exactly what I expected. Nice and tucked in there. Sits on the floor flat. We've got a little bit to fill in right there, but nothing like what we had before. So now I'm going to remove this back out of here, and then I'm going to show you how to caulk this down. Now we're going to lay down a bunch of caulk right here. So we need to make sure that we get everything covered. Then from underneath, we're going to drill holes and put in stainless steel self-drilling bolts up underneath there. This is the kind of caulk we're using right now, and this is called PL Max. This stuff is what we use on a lot of our stuff here in the shop, and there's a lot of reason, but mostly because of the consistency and the texture that comes out of the tube. It works the best. It's the most manageable before it gets hard. Any situation that you're working on something, you need really hard caulk. Got a pneumatic caulk gun. We're gonna run ribs. I'll show you when we're done. Literally took 2 or 3 minutes with this massive caulk gun. I mean, if I wouldn't have had this, I'd have been messing around with this for an hour. We definitely know that it doesn't take an hour playing with caulk. But this is pretty much how you do it. You could lay it down a little bit nicer than I did. maybe be a little bit more gentle, but I was in a hurry. Now we've got it slid up there, and we're gonna have to drill holes in these areas before we put it down, and then we're gonna have to come through with the caulk and caulk it all down here. We should be looking pretty good. Hopefully it starts to pull down once we do it. Okay, so note to you guys about drill bits. These are shit. These are okay. These are Drill Force off of Amazon. I'll put a link in the bottom. Holy crap. What a pain in the butt. So we're getting it drilled down. I kept breaking the drill bits off and this screw right here, trying to suck this down. But you can see when it gets pulled down properly, you're going to get some spooge coming out the side. And spooge is what you want. Now, after you feel like you've got it caulked down well enough, you want to make sure you set something heavy on top of it so the force pushes down on the caulk. These are all the ones I could get to from underneath on this side. Now we're going to go over to that side and go from the point up. When you're doing this and you get it fastened down, it's going to squeeze a bunch of caulk out. So make sure you get them screwed in. And if you break one, just pull it out or move over a little bit, because this is a real pain in the butt. Make sure that you use number 12, 1 inch to 1.5 inch self-drilling screws. And I do highly recommend the hex head ones. Using Phillips head, pain in the butt. Plus, make sure they're stainless steel. I'll put a link down in the description. Here's the part that I kind of made a mistake with. I should have cut off all of these screws immediately and then laid heavy stuff on the top of there. So don't make the same mistake I did. I'm sure it'll be okay. So it doesn't look super ultra pretty, but we're gonna cut off all of this stuff. We'll probably use a straight die grinder and snip these off, or bolt cutters or something. So for the most part, great with how this went. Got her all tagged down. Now we're gonna have to paint everything underneath here, seal up all of our gaps and stuff, but this thing is solid, boy.
That's solid as fuck, though.
Dude, man, that is so cool.
We cocked it and screwed it as good as we could.
We did. Well, we put in some filler pieces, then put in a little bit of caulking over the top of that. Now we're going to put in a couple more filler pieces down here in the bottom. We're sealing this all up, and it is truly, truly solid. We welded that in there. Then we don't show our welds because they're not the prettiest of pretty things. And we got tons of this glue that we can put over everything. We've sealed it up with truck bed liner because we really don't want it to rust. Plus, we've coated it all up underneath here as well to seal it up and help it grow. Man, that is a total transformation from what this thing looked like before. It's insane. Looking at this after I was done with it, I wish I would have took the caulk and laid it into them gap portions right there. But, you know, nobody's perfect. It was a lot of work. I'm sincerely impressed with what we've done here. Me and Christian did most of this ourselves. Well, we did all of it ourselves. I was going to say he did a lot, I did a lot, we both did a lot. And as long as when you sit in your seat and you bolt that thing down, it doesn't rock, you're good to go. I'm telling you, it is extremely important that it doesn't rock, because you've got to think about the inertia of an accident. You do not want this to come apart in an accident, okay? So doing it the way I did it definitely makes it super solid, and you're going to be super duper safe. Check this out. Christian, he really gets into his work.
Should have seen it on the other one. I had it all over.
Now, we're going to let it sit overnight, let the paint dry, let it sit here in the heated shop, and Christian's going to Turnstiles because he has a little show he does every Wednesday up there in Clutch Society in Grand Rapids. So, man, I'm really impressed considering what this started like and what it looked like at the beginning. It's insane.
It's Fred Flintstone, and now it's normal.
Yeah, nothing really cool to say about this other than, yeah, that's pretty dope. All right, so the most important thing about fixing one of these is you've got to think about the driver of this automobile. This cannot rock. It needs to be super solid, and we can see Christian's putting all his body weight in it, and the only thing that's moving is the seat. So keep that in mind. if you ever attempt doing something like this. But yeah, that damn thing turned out pretty freaking good. So we got that all done, and that thing is solid. Remember, don't be the next to them, be the absolute first of you.
And if anyone else can do it, you can do it too.
We're standing out here at the new Clayway compound where we're going to film all our videos from now on. It's a pretty big place. Bought it from a good friend of mine. I'm very blessed to have it. He sold it to me on a land contract, so no, I didn't come up with a couple $100,000 and just do this because I don't have that kind of money. The hopes is to have a few of you folks out here, maybe in the summertime, camping and stuff like that, with me and Christian, having a good time. So look for that stuff in the future. If you've got a question for me, you can hit me up on Clay's AC and Auto Repair on the Facebook Messenger. I can't help you with old baby mama drama. Maybe it will help you fix that whip, even for free. If I can, I'll tell you what I know. Please don't send me videos and voice messages, just text, okay? I'm a little bit old and I'm just... Please consider subscribing, clicking the notification, sharing my videos, and give me them sweet old thumbs up. God bless, folks. Have the best of days.